I just want to add a little to some of the questions that have been asked. A question was asked on the railways and what has been happening, especially with respect to being able to evacuate goods from the ports. Two things happening. First, I'm sure that some are already familiar with the concession given to General Electric, to GE, to refurbish the narrow gauge lines, which of course starts from the ports itself, and that concession is already in place, and we expect that things should begin to happen very quickly. Also, a private sector, one of the members of that consortium, APM Terminal, is going to do something in the Lugu, which is a railway station on the way to Ibadan, and is trying to develop an inland port there. Now that inland port, when developed, and they say that they can do this within 10 weeks, we hope that that will mean that that would just mean a further reduction in the pressure on the Apapa ports. Aside from that, the standard gauge line, which is funded by the China Exim Bank, has already started, and again that also is taken off from the ports, from the Apapa ports. We expect that by the end of this year we should see significant progress between the Lagos-Ibadan end of that standard gauge line. As a matter of fact, our target is to have that bit of it concluded by the end of this year, and we hope that we can achieve that. So that will move goods also from the Apapa port out of Lagos to at least as far as Ibadan before we then go on to Kano, which is the terminal point of the standard gauge line. The other question which I'd like to add to is the one on the eastern ports. I think somebody asked about the Onitsha ports. Yes. The concession agreement on that has been finalized. All the technical evaluation has been done. The concession agreement has been finalized now, and that's going to the Attorney General's office. So we expect that that should be sorted out very, very shortly, but that has been concluded. In that same eastern port axis, there's a Warri port, which is still, the technical evaluation is still going on. That hasn't been concluded, but we expect that that should also move on very quickly. So we think that there should be some activity around the eastern ports, especially with the conclusion of the Onitsha port and the Warri ports. The other point, which I think I should just add something to, is the frustration that many of us feel about coming into Nigeria through our airports, and of course, some of the frustration also around the seaports, bringing in goods, etc. The point that was made, especially about two people sitting around and questioning you and passing your passport from one person to the other, is one that I'm sure most of us are, just generally quite irritated about. But what it is that we require what is called the eye check, which is a fairly elaborate device, which enables us to get advanced passenger information ahead of passengers actually arriving at the ports. Now this will enable us to do two things. One, it enables us to give visas on arrival because you have all the information. And secondly, it removes the necessity of more than one person checking the passports because you already have the advanced information. So the security people don't need to sit down there also and check the information at the same time. So they work from the back end. We expect that when that is installed, we'll be able to achieve that and remove the nuisance of 2 people or 3 people. Just about, I think it was last week, we held a meeting with all of the agencies that are usually at the ports. And you find, of course, that there are several. Sometimes you find up to 14 different agencies at the ports. So the whole idea is to reduce this number such that only those who must absolutely be there are there. For example, we've said, NDLEA, SON, there are so many that are there that really do not absolutely have to be there, and they only need to be summoned when their services are required. So we're looking at how to do this. I think the permanent solution that we are proposing, especially for the whole, bringing in goods and taking goods out and all of that of our ports, is our single window, the national trading platform. We've gone very far with that, and we expect that should be on stream very shortly. Of course, that will come with the scanners and the whole works, and we expect that should come on stream very shortly. We are at the point where this is going to affect for a final approval, and we expect that should happen very, very shortly. With the single window, a lot of the stress will be greatly reduced, and of course, with the appropriate scanners, run again by concessions with the PPP arrangement, with concessions, a lot of these facilities to the private sector, so that so that the service is much more efficient. I think we should be able to achieve greater ease of coming into our ports, bringing in goods to our ports, and exporting from our ports, or taking goods out of our ports. So let me join my cabinet colleagues in again thanking you for making the time yet again to attend the quarterly business forum. This is the 7th forum, and there are many here who have attended all 7. To them, of course, we are especially indebted for their consistent faith and support for this process. But even those who have not attended 7 have attended several, and some who are attending for the first time. But we think that it is important that we continue to emphasize that for us, both philosophically and as a practical matter, our partnership with the private sector is fundamental. Aside from the quarterly business forum, we have also established other platforms to harness this partnership. And these platforms include, as you know, the Industrial Policy and Competitiveness Advisory Council and the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, or rather long names, but by and large, these are interactive platforms where we bring the private sector to collaborate with us, to think through policy with us, develop policy with us, and in the Competitiveness Council to even implement policy with us. And I think that this is the way that we ought to continue, and this is the way that we have to continue, because when you consider the size of the federal government's budget, even when you total, as the Minister of Finance had said, when you total or aggregate the state government budgets, you still find that the absolute amounts are very small indeed. But once you factor in the private sector, that becomes the real economy of Nigeria. And really, there's absolutely no way of going ahead and talking about economic development of a country this size without the private sector sitting right there at the table and playing a critical role. But I've asked the question, and I'll ask again, what was wrong with the Nigerian economy, and what did we need to do to correct the flaws? There are several issues, many of which have already been very well articulated, and we articulate them time and time again, especially in all the earlier presentations. But I want to talk about what I think is probably the biggest problem, but which we, for some reason, hardly talk about when discussing our national economy. This is grand corruption in the public finance space. I think that sometimes the way we talk about the Nigerian economy, it almost appears as if it is, it is the economy of, say, Norway, or Sweden or somewhere, where all things are equal, And even when we refer to what has taken place in our economy, we almost sound as if this is in every sense a very normal business environment, a normal public finance environment, but that's not the case. And I do not think that any considerations of our economic development can be properly or honestly done without fully analyzing the role of corruption, especially grand corruption in the public finance space. And you'll see that, despite record high levels of oil prices, very little was invested in infrastructure, and record levels of leakages were recorded, especially in the past few years. This is the fundamental issue in our economy. Corruption affects everything. It affects even judgment as to what sort of infrastructure to put in place, or whether to even put in place infrastructure, or whether infrastructure will ever be completed. It is so fundamental that we cannot even think of our economy without thinking of what to do about it. And it's not just, sometimes when we talk about the economy, we say, okay, we've relied on a single commodity. And that's one of the reasons why we're where we are. But yes, that's true. It's a fact, but the fact is that proceeds of that single commodity were regularly hijacked consistently by a few. That is really the problem. If we spend the proceeds of that single commodity the way we ought to spend it, we won't be where we are today. The truth is that it was hijacked consistently by a few people. That most of the proceeds go to rent seekers who invest little in industry and production. So for example, in a so-called, I'm sure many of us are familiar with the so-called strategic alliance contracts with the NNPC and the NDPC. The promoters of the companies made away with close to $3 billion US, almost a tenth of our reserves at one point. Now, there's no way in the world that if somebody makes away with almost a tenth of your reserves, that you're not going to have a major economic shock. And if we don't deal with it, if we don't talk about it, how do we really discuss our economy in any real honest way with a view to ensuring that these things do not happen again? In one single transaction, a few weeks to the elections in 2015, sums of $100 billion and $289 million were just, frittered, embezzled by a few. When you consider that in 2014, as the Minister of Finance said, oil prices were at an average of $110 a barrel, and only 99 billion naira was spent on power works and housing. Only 99 billion. And in one day, 100 billion naira was issued. And people essentially shared it. And 99 billion was spent on power works and housing. And when we talk about our economy, we talk about it as if it is the normal. It's not that's abnormal by every standard, completely abnormal. Nobody should talk about the economy when you have these kinds of huge leakages, huge corruption that completely makes even what you are allocating to capital, what you are allocating to infrastructure, just makes nonsense of it. Because when you compare, we saw from the presentation of Minister of Finance, 14 billion spent on agriculture in 2014, 14 billion. Transportation, 15 billion. So the total spend on capital in those critical areas was 153 billion. And in 2 weeks before the 2015 elections, 150 billion was released and essentially shared. So if your total infrastructure spend, your total capital spend is 150, and you can share 153 billion, let's face it, that is completely incredible. It's the sort of thing that doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. And when we are talking about, and when we talk about the economy, we absolutely must understand that is the problem. Today, with less revenue, we have increased funding, capital funding, by 400%, as the minister pointed out, in public, in power works and housing, in defense, in transportation, in agriculture. So economic analysis in Nigeria is either fraudulent or ignorant if we do not bring the money lost to corruption into the maths. We absolutely must bring it into the mass. It is a fight against corruption, especially in public finance. And I can say what I have seen is that if you have a president, and I say this with all sense of responsibility, if you have a president in this country who is not corrupt, 50% of your financial problems, especially in the public financial space, are over. 50% at least is over. And this is what I have seen. I can demonstrate this with facts. I can demonstrate this with figures. If the president is corrupt, 50% of your financial problems, especially in the public financial space, are over. 50% at least is over. And this is what I have seen. I can demonstrate this with facts. I can demonstrate this with figures. If the president is corrupt, 50% the entire financial system of the country is compromised. And that's what we've seen. It's completely compromised from the figures that we've just seen. It's completely compromised. That is an absolutely important point that we must take into account. I'm not saying that corruption under this administration has been completely dealt with. No, I mean, certainly not. Where corruption has become systematic, such as we have in our country today, you can't deal with it in one fell swoop. It's not possible. In any event, you still have a lot of corruption fighting back. The system fights back, and it's both an internal and external fight back. And you have to be steadfast and strategic to win the battle. There is no way that you have a system such as ours that has consistently thrived on corruption and proceeds of corruption, and public finance in particular, that will give up and just roll over and say, hey, guys, the problem has been solved. No. It's a system that has fed on corruption. It's a system that has actively dwelt on corruption. And it's a system that affects all aspects of governance. So so clearly, trying to deal with it is certainly not a walk in the park, as they say. But I want to say that that task has already begun. And that task is being done consistently. And I believe that going forward in the next few years, even no matter how we slice it, if we stick to policy, especially on controlling excesses and corruption in public finance, this country will make the kind of progress that it deserves to make with all of the resources at our disposal. If we stick to a policy of ensuring that, at least as far as public finance is concerned, there is no impunity and that we hold people to account, I'm absolutely confident that this country has everything that it takes to really make the kind of progress that we deserve to make as a nation. So again, let me just thank everyone for your participation and for your continued support and confidence in the work that we're doing. And I want to say that all of the comments you've made, all of the issues that you have raised, we take them seriously, and we will go back and look at what we need to do to ensure that all of our objectives, all of our plans and thoughts come to fruition, and that our country becomes a much better place for doing business, and that the economy of our country grows to the benefit of our people. So I want to thank you again very much. God bless you.